My name is Daniel Mercer, 35 years old, producer of Serpent Shadows, USA. I came to Brazil to record a special. Did they really find Titanoboa in Brazil? And I returned with something worse than a yes or no. I returned with an unsettling certainty. Some questions don't want answers in a video. They want silence where the water breathes. They swore the giant was seen in the dark river between floodplain and Igapo, that the current suddenly stopped, that the boat's hull vibrated as if a lung beneath the world inflated. I followed the tracks with a camera, guide, and American stubbornness. What I found was not a fossil. It was a presence that demanded the lens be lowered. The rumor that crosses borders. I arrived in Manaus with the hot topic: viral videos of a colossal serpent crossing canals and persistent talk of a live Titanoboa reappearing in Brazil. I knew the harsh truth. Titanoboa is prehistoric, a fossil from Colombia, a creature from another time. But I also knew about giant anacondas recorded today, and a recently separated species by scientists, even heavier, circulating in the darkest tributaries. My script was simple. Check lagoons where tourists saw breathing logs, listen to river dwellers, film without becoming prey to the algorithm. What didn't fit into the script was the cold chill that ran down my neck when the river stopped. The first curve that didn't obey the wind, Leandro's boat, my pilot, was chewing small waves at the end of the afternoon. The sun dripped through the canopy like fine honey. 2 river dolphins cut the mirror ahead and disappeared. Then the shore fell silent. Not the normal silence, the kind full of animals, but a bad silence, like a room holding its breath before someone opens the door. The water's surface, perfect, formed a wrinkle that crossed the bow and died at the base of a giant tree, as if pushed by a huge hand. Leandro lowered the engine with the calm of someone who has already escaped what doesn't appear in manuals. "Here, we speak quietly," he said, in a small church voice. I instinctively turned off the camera and hated myself for obeying. A trail that wasn't from a caiman. The muddy path along the shore showed a recent story. Parallel grooves marking a heavy drag, water fanning out like a leaf, and a channel in the middle as smooth as leather rubbed by hand. A caiman drags its fingers, leaves a claw mark, a flattened trace. That was something else. A thick, continuous body, drawing a perfect curve, entering and exiting a freshwater hole, which appeared black between the leaves. "This is where the rumor was born," Leandro commented, "and this is where the rumor grows if someone turns on high beams." When the water breathed, the mist lifted in a thread, fine, like a knight rehearsing. Small bubbles rose in pairs, died without sound. I heard a low thump under the hull, not from stone but from living mass touching wood with the patience of a predator. The bow turned a degree. Leandro loosened his grip. If it turns, we turn back. The river taught grammar with the calm of one who would decide the ending, whether I wanted it or not. The face of someone who saw and doesn't want to prove. In the community further ahead, Donna Adalia, eyes with a map of the river, passed her hand over the bench and said, as if offering bitter medicine, "What you're looking for has an owner. It has a time, and it doesn't like light." I asked about the video of the moving log, about the roar many swore to hear at night, about tourists who returned without their phones, swearing they had filmed the impossible. She pushed a cup of weak coffee toward me and replied, "If the water stopped and you felt your chest stop along with it, you don't need proof. You need to leave certain." The weight of the word Titanoboa on the satellite radio, my editor asked for a strong angle. Can we nail Titanoboa in the title? I bit my answer and swallowed the fossils in memory. The serpent that existed millions of years ago, in a heat greater than today's, measured by vertebrae the size of fists, a stone ghost that would never swim here again. What was there, alive and alert, was another colossus. The anacondas that make the ground breathe and, when they become legends, become targets. I took a deep breath, looked at the river's curve and said, "We can nail one thing. The water chooses who answers the question. The first back. There's no music for this, just the sound of your own blood." A dark arc broke the surface 3 steps from the bow, smooth as cold oil, thick as the trunk of a young tree. It wasn't a leap, it wasn't an attack. It was a warning, a back that centered light, relying on the density of the world to say, I'm here. The trail dove without hurry and left small, polite ripples that died at the grass's knee. The camera, heavy on my chest, seemed like a mistake. My finger, guilt and habit, almost turned it on. I didn't. I kept the image that can't be edited, the story that grows wrong. The film I didn't make, someone else would. A helicopter with stolen audio, a thumbnail with red arrows, enormous serpent captured in 4K. The rush that brings boat light bait scream, and the water patient teaching the lesson again with a whirlpool, hull swallowed half an inch, a chicken disappearing without spectacle. The forest knows how to demand promotion with tragedy, and tragedy generates comments. The perfect cycle, for everyone except for what's alive. I chose the good anger. In the darkness of the lodging, with mosquitoes tuning strings on the roof, I re-recorded my own briefing. Titanoboa is a fossil. What we have here is giant enough to become a myth without becoming a lie. If we show the way, we kill the subject the wrong way. The script changed its word. The title gained a question mark that isn't cowardice. It's offense. And that certainty returned like cold fever. Not everything discovered needs to leave on a boat with the camera on. The night fell like a metal lid over the river. There was no moonlight, only a thick grey that made the water look like liquid metal. Leandro turned off the engine long before the curve and let the hull go, like a leaf obeying the current. The forest breathed with that chorus that deceives beginners. Thousands of sounds at once, but none that matter when the water decides to speak. I held the camera on my lap, turned off. Its weight poked at my compulsion. My whole body wanted a frame, proof, a piece of the impossible captured in pixels. That's when Leandro whispered, without looking, "If you hear the river hold its breath, hold yours too." The river held its breath. It wasn't wind, it wasn't the distant boat's wake. It was silence. The hull, which had previously made microwave-like sounds, touched the surface and stayed still. Small bubbles rose to a hand's breadth from the bow, aligned like rosary beads. I felt the air change temperature, a low chill that starts at the belly. Leandro placed his hand on the edge, fingers spread as if asking for a blessing. The water lilies in the backwater moved an inch inward, all together, in an obedience that doesn't come from the wind. The first whirlpool formed without haste, the size of a plate pulling leaves and a thick twig, as if setting the table. The canoe turned 2 degrees. I gripped the camera without turning it on. It was a reflex, not a decision. The water made a low thump under the hull, not a sound, a sensation. Then the back broke the skin of the world, dark olive green, as wide as my chest, large scales drinking the little light and returning it as an oily gleam. No head, just the physical certainty of an ancient body fulfilling its boundary. Leandro breathed for the first time in a minute. Not for us. The canoe backed up, like a crab. I followed the movement with my neck aching from not looking at what my body begged for. The whirlpool died like a candle that snuffs out without a breath. The forest became deliberately noisy again. The river returned us to the shore without touching us. And for a second, the urge to cry and laugh fought in the same muscle of my face. The news that calls for disaster. The next morning, before the coffee cooled, 2 boats climbed the creek, their engines roaring as if they were competing for attention. 4 men, caps, LED flashlights, a thick rope, a bag of feed, a chicken. Leandro didn't even look at me. Rumor spreads. I knew. The night before, I'd sent a short message to the producer saying, "No coordinates." Perhaps someone less ethical had sent, "There's a giant, come see." They stopped at the backwater and did everything that becomes a viral video, yelling, nervous laughter, flashlight in the river's eye. The chicken clucked until the sound broke. "Today's the day," one of them announced, as if the water cared about his schedule. The elder from the community stood up in the canoe and simply said, "No." And "no" there has the weight of law. It didn't help. The river responded as it does to questions asked with shouts. The surface bulged. The whirlpool opened by the bait. The rope stretched and sang in the man's fingers. The chicken descended, as if the world had a hole. There was no explosion, no cinematic leap. There was instant disappearance. The man swore an obscenity the forest didn't repeat. The engine sputtered, coughed, died. Another whirlpool formed behind the hull and spun the boat a quarter turn, as if someone was marking their position to teach respect. No one learned. "It's there! Shine light!" That's when I heard, closer than before, the sigh. Not from the serpent, from the lake. That soft ooh of water displacing large masses. The water lilies trembled on their stems. The hull creaked inside, as if the wood remembered what it's like to be a tree under a strong wind. And my fingers, which had already reflexively turned on the camera, turned it off on their own. I felt like an invader with empty hands. And it felt good. The conversation that weighs more than proof. In the afternoon, when the heat began to torture slowly, a woman with calm eyes sat in the shade and offered me bitter leaf tea. "You came to ask about the old-time serpent," she said, and it wasn't even a question. I tried to put science into the sentence. Titanoboa fossil, giant vertebrates, Paleocene heat, and she smiled as if watching a child count stars. The old-time serpent turned to stone. The one today is the mother of the water. It's not bigger because it's old. It's bigger because you look at it with hunger. I went silent. She added, "If you love up close, it kills. If you love from afar, it creates." I talked about the channel, the title, the weight of the word, did they find it? She replied, "Sometimes the question mark is the only fence that still holds curiosity. Midnight of proof that isn't useful." On the third night, I decided to record only sound. No light, no lens. A microphone on the edge of the canoe, foam protecting it from the humidity, and silence as technique. The river gave. First the low pulse of bubbles rising in pairs. Then the thump under the hull, vibration captured in the bass, beautiful and dirty like the heart of a drum. A howler monkey's roar in the distance made an upper note. And finally, the larger whirlpool, a slow voo that my chest recognized before the earphones. It was perfect. It was enough to nourish me and not feed anyone wrong. The curious returned with a 10,000 lumen flashlight. Focused like a knife, the water accepted the light for a second. It returned with mosquitoes. Then, the beam drew nothing. Their canoe turned half a circle. The biggest one, who had been laughing loudly, went silent. I heard in the microphone the accelerated breath of someone who thought they came to hunt and discovered they were bait for their own vanity. The question that shouldn't be asked in the morning, my editor asked via satellite, "So, Titanoboa, can we nail it as a no?" I looked at the river and understood that sometimes saying no is another way of opening the gate. We can nail this. Titanoboa is a creature of stone. Here we have a giant of flesh enough to become a legend without becoming a lie. The rest, the river answers to those who deserve it. On the other side, office silence. I heard keystrokes. Send the audio. The last back. Before leaving, Leandro took me to a place he only shows to those who pass the test. A closed arm of water, a perfect mirror, the smell of old leaves. "Here it sheds its skin," he said, pointing to the shore. A strip of recent skin, shiny, with scales that looked like new coins. I trembled as if I'd found gold, and remembered that gold kills villages. I touched it with the glove. The world fit on the tips of my fingers. In the center of the mirror, the water made a crease and opened into a blade a hand's breadth wide. The back appeared one last time, close, polite, enormous. It wasn't a threat. It was a farewell. I lowered my head. Leandro paddled backward. The crease closed. The shiny skin remained at the tree's root, a promise that the river continues, with or without a thumbnail. The satellite phone didn't stop vibrating with short messages. Location. Thumbnail with red arrow. Can we film with a bigger boat? While the foreigner on the other end asked for a spectacle, the river answered with the patience of an ancient creature. And the river's patience always beats our haste. We left early, Leandro and I, to check the curve where the curious had spun their boat the night before. The morning light didn't soften the place. On the muddy shore, I saw the mark that wasn't from a caiman. A deep trail, smooth in the center, wavy at the edges, as if someone had dragged a live, polished log to the base of the giant tree. Nearby, hurried footprints, curves in the hull, an abandoned sandal with a broken strap. No one drowned, they said. But the scare took dignity. The rumor grew the wrong way. At the mudflat, an elder stood waiting, arms behind his body, a gaze as if measuring not the tide, but the mood. "Today the men from the city are coming," he murmured. "They'll want to measure the water with a construction tape." I wanted to laugh, but it didn't happen. I knew exactly who they were. Technician with a clipboard, vest with a logo, the desire to delimit what cannot be. They arrived in 2 outboard boats, GPS pinging markers, a foldable drone shining in its box. The coordinator greeted us coldly, explained the protocol, pointed at me. "We'll need the images for the report." I returned a measured truth. "I have audio and reports." He sighed, disappointed. "Audio doesn't yield decisions." Leandro, who doesn't like wasting time with the city, cut in. "The decision here is not to shout. The first mistake was the anchor. They threw the iron into the backwater, and the claw hit the bottom with a sound too dry. The second, the tape measure crossing the water, as if measuring the mouth of an altar was a neutral act. The third, the loud voice explaining the procedure. The water became too smooth. I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise like grass before a bad wind. "Turn it off," I whispered to the drone technician. He smiled pityingly. "It's just a wind test." The hum rose, a fine razor cutting through the sky. The lake held its breath. The water lilies slowly pressed together, forming a narrow corridor toward the center, a pattern I had already seen. "The door," Leandro whispered. "They've opened the door." The whirlpool didn't start small. It opened the size of a tire, swallowing 2 leaves in one turn. The tape measure danced like a metal snake. The lead weight sank and disappeared as if it were plastic. The coordinator ordered, "Pull it in," and the boat responded, turning half its body, spun by an invisible hand. The drone, obedient to its calibration, descended a meter without command. The technician cursed, compensated, lifted it too much, the wind cut, and the thing fell into the mirror with a humiliating plop. The water accepted the gift and drew wave ankles. Leandro placed his hand on my shoulder, as if holding me from the inside. "Look at what hurry buys." Our light canoe backed up. The official boat stayed, stuck in its own bureaucracy. The coordinator screamed, "Motor!" The motor sputtered, coughed, roared to life. The propeller dug too deep into the water, and the hull surged into the whirlpool like a scared horse. I already knew the bad ending of that math. The back appeared 3 steps from the stern of the official boat. Dark olive green, thick as a trunk, large scales drinking the morning sun, returning the shine of oil. It wasn't a leap, it was a wall. The world shrank to fit that curve of beast. The technician forgot the protocol, found prayer again. The coordinator dropped the clipboard. The sound of it turning into wet wood became ridiculous in the wrong theater. "Back, no motor," Leandro taught, his voice low, full of world. It was the only command the river accepted. The boat left the curve with the dignity it could. The water flattened slowly, as if laying down an old anger. The whirlpool died on purpose. The tape reappeared with a knot. The anchor returned light, empty of meaning. The drone, the lake, kept the drone. In the afternoon, the coordinator tried the route of power. "We'll need to delimit, put up buoys, pull a fence, broadcast on the radio." Donna Adelia responded with a question. "Are you going to fence the sky too?" He didn't understand, or pretended not to. "How are we going to avoid tragedy?" I saw the answer in her eyes, by respecting silence. But she used another word, promise. A promise not to come at night, not to use bait, not to shout, not to point the spotlight. They wrote it down. Making promises on paper is a hobby of the city. At the end of the day, I received a short message as subtle as an order. "We need a conclusion. Yes or no?" I stared at the sentence as if it were a hook. The video title weighed on my forehead. Did they really find Titanoboa in Brazil? I took a deep breath and replied, "They found something big enough for you not to want to measure. Titanoboa is a fossil. The one today is different. The no you want doesn't close the door they opened. The question mark keeps curious people outside." At night, we returned to the lake without the canoe. The village was gathered on the shore, not in celebration or mourning, but in calm alertness. A circle formed, cold smoke rose. The elders sang a melody of 3 notes, repeated, insistent, holding the world in the right place. No one looked at me, and it was good. I wasn't the center of anything. The elder approached, placed the seed necklace back on my wrist as if attaching a watch that marks another time. "Tomorrow you will leave," he said, without regret. "If you're going to tell it in a way that closes the path." I nodded. He pointed to the backwater, where the water reflected stars that were not ours. "She sleeps with one eye open. Don't poke the dream of those who guard the harbor." In the early morning, I recorded one more audio sequence. The file is almost silence. Almost. In the low spectrum, the world pulses. Bubbles, a thump, a polite voo, the wood of the edge trembling like the string of a deep guitar. It's ugly in a beautiful way. It's enough to remember what matters without giving away what kills. At dawn, Leandro took me to a beach of mud just for us. On the shore, a fresh strip of skin, soft, still elastic, with wide scales drawing a mosaic that makes your hand tremble with the desire to show it and the fear of attracting. I held the skin with my glove. The light made each crescent moon shine. "Proof," my brain whispered. "Invitation," the river corrected. I wrapped the skin, kept it at will, left the skin where it was. Sometimes, the best souvenir is not taking anything. Before leaving, one of the curious came back, alone, without a chicken, without a flashlight. He arrived in flip-flops, head down, shame on his shoulder. He apologized to those who mattered, to the shore. The water made a crease that wasn't a message. It was measured forgiveness. He left more slowly, and I became less cynical for a minute. I returned to the inn with the script ready. Did they find it? That ends with an honest no and yes. No, Titanoboa didn't return. Yes, there is something so big and so alive that the best answer is to be silent and obey the rule of those who have lived here since before our channel was born. I returned to Manaus with the smell of the river stuck to my clothes and the sound of the whirlpool beating in my chest like the second beat of my heart. At the airport, the world of air conditioning and queues felt like a joke from a place that doesn't know the weight of water when it decides not to answer. My editor called before boarding, "Daniel, we need to close today, yes or no?" The echo of the lake held my tongue. I replied with what I learned at the shore. No and yes. No Titanoboa. Yes, a living giant that demands respect and secrecy. His sigh crossed the call like bad wind, but he accepted it. Send it your way. At the hotel, I connected the recorder. The audio seemed like nothing, and yet it was everything. The deep hum of bubbles rising, the thump under the hull, the voo of the large whirlpool, and over it all, the thick silence, the kind that only happens when the water holds its breath. I turned up the volume to the max, closed my eyes and replayed the back cutting through the mirror, too close to be a thumbnail without guilt. I opened the editor, put together the skeleton of the video with the exact gaps, blurry map, crossed out names, erased routes. Enough for the story to breathe, not enough to attract those who will kill. The legal team's email arrived like a stone. Avoid definitive terms. Include a warning not to attempt to locate. Emphasize real risk and local rules. For the first time, the corporate warning served as a fence. I wrote at the opening, "This video does not reveal locations. Do not encourage expeditions. Respect the riverine communities. The forest does not forgive those who fence what should be revered." I posted it at 9 p.m. The chat came like a flood. Fake. Coordinates. Release the beast. I saw this in 1998 on Madeira. Respect the water. Never again will I get in a canoe at night. I let the chat fight alone. I pinned to the top. Titanoboa is a fossil. What you heard is living proof that something exists that doesn't need a name to demand respect. Do not try to find it. 3 hours later, I received what I feared. A message from a partner, proposing a paid expedition with 3 boats, thermal drones, bait spotters. I rejected it with a phrase I learned from the elder: "Don't poke the dream of those who guard the harbor." The man replied with laughter and a dollar sign. I blocked him. I put the phone face down and kept listening to the air conditioning fail, as if the lake were rising up the walls again. The next morning, I had missed calls from an official number. I answered the third. A trained voice, invisible ID through the phone. "We need raw data for the report. There's a risk to navigation." I responded with calm that didn't seem like mine. "The greatest risk comes from the noise you bring. I'll send the audio and the recommendations from those who live there. No bright lights, no bait, no shouting, no motors in backwaters. If it's necessary to restrict access, do it without turning it into an attraction." On the other end, administrative silence. Then the usual bureaucrat. "Understood. Maybe not." I returned to the United States with my bag smelling of river and my backpack lighter than it deserved. At home, every stream became a rehearsal of memory. In Florida, when I filmed a stretch of mangrove at sunset, the tide held the air for a second and my body obeyed without thinking. I breathed less, lowered the camera, and waited. Nothing happened. And yet I thanked softly, like someone passing by an open church. 2 weeks later, the video hit big numbers and, paradoxically, brought good silence to my inbox. Messages from floodplain guides, biologists who've seen too much, people who grew up on the lake's edge. "I told it without opening the door," one said. "Thanks for leaving the map with a hole," said another. There were also the empty threats, the usual, "I'll find it." I didn't respond. Those who need an audience shout alone. What stayed? The most frightening sound wasn't the back cutting through the water, it was my own hunger to show. Every time my hand itches for the perfect frame, I remember the chicken pulled without spectacle, the motor sputtering, the boat spinning, and most of all, the whirlpool opening like the mouth of an altar. I remember the woman's words at the shore. "If you love up close, it kills. If you love from afar, it creates." I began to love from afar. I close with what the river taught me in order for those who insist on going. If the water stops suddenly, you stop too. If the water spins, you turn back. No conversation. No spotlight, no drone, no bait, no shouting. If filming, don't give a path. If telling, close the door. Did they really find Titanoboa in Brazil? The honest answer fits in 2 lines. No. Titanoboa stayed in the stone, immense, impossible, the silence of a museum. Yes, we found a giant alive enough to become legend without becoming a lie. And it stays where it should, because we chose not to turn the altar into an attraction. If you've read this far, you know. The scariest part wasn't what I saw, it was what I decided not to show. And that's exactly why this story matters. Did you enjoy this story? Leave a like now, comment your theory, and subscribe to the Serpent Shadows channel. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next real horror stories.